Well, the first question is, what is Azure? So let's just go to Google and just type in the word Azure. And you can see we have got a couple of interesting links. First of all, Wikipedia. So Wikipedia says that Azure is a cloud computing service. So what does that mean? Well, we've got various things on the internet. So you don't actually have to download programs. For instance, if I was using Tableau, Power BI, I would probably be downloading a program onto my computer and using that. That program would then do all of the computation, all of the calculations that are necessary. Instead, all of that is offloaded to the internet. So it's not just compute power, it's also storage, and it's also lots of different types of applications. So you can see that Microsoft Azure, used to be called Windows Azure, has at least a 10-year life cycle that it's had so far. So it is fairly well established. It's not something that's got lots of bugs on day one. I mean, it may still have some bugs, but generally those are for more recent things that it's got. And what recent things has it got? Quite a lot. It constantly develops and develops. If you have a look at some of the services that are available, we've got computer services such as virtual machines and app services. We've got identity, so how to actually log in to Azure. We've got storage services with 5 different types of services that we've got here. And we'll be looking at table, blob and file services as part of this course. Data management, so we've got Cosmos DB and SQL Server database in all of its different forms. We've got Synapse Analytics and HD Insight we'll be looking at in this course. For machine learning, we'll be looking at the Azure Machine Learning Studio and Service and cognitive services. We'll also be looking at DevOps, which is a way to control how many computers you've got. Say you want 50 computers to be used for development purposes, but only for a few hours in a day or something like that. We've got functions and logic apps, and then we've got the Internet of Things with the Internet of Things Hub, Central and Sphere. And you've got these probably all in a location which is close to you because it is all around the world. And as you can see from the left hand side, those computing services include compute, network, storage, databases, Internet of Things, big data and analytics, artificial intelligence, that's the AI right at the top, serverless computing and DevOps solutions. And we'll go into each of these categories as part of this course. And the great news is that you don't have to buy the services, you only rent them. So you're only going to be paying for these services on a pay-as-you-go basis, only for the duration that you are using them. So what Azure is, it's a series of different services which are integrated together and which can also be integrated with your on-premises server. That's also known as on-prem. This will allow you to do things you've not been able to do with your current on-prem structure. For example, you could just expand your storage with just a click of a mouse. So in this AZ900 course, we'll be looking at a lot of the important ones. We'll just be seeing what they can do. We won't be going into a huge amount of detail, but enough detail so you know what they can do and how to distinguish each of these from the other services. So in the next video, we're actually going to sign up to Azure. We're going to get a couple of $100 of free credit as part of this sign up. I'm afraid Azure does cost money, but having all of these services would cost you money if you're doing it on premises. You would have to buy the software. So at least there's a bit of a try before you buy philosophy, at least with the start of Azure. So we'll sign up for that in the next video. So let's get our free account. And here I'm in Google and I'll just type in Azure sign up, and you can see that you can try any Azure services and keep going for free, and there are more than 25 products always free, and you start with a free credit. So let's click on this, and you can see 12 months free services, a certain amount of credit. This keeps changing, so you might see $200, $250, and there are certain services which are now free for 12 months and certain which are free forever. Now there are limits, so 1 million compute function sounds very generous, and it is. However, 400 RUs per second it's enough to start you off, so you wouldn't be able to keep going with free service if that's what you wanted. Now if you do go beyond this £150, $200 credit for 30 days, then your Azure account will just stop. So you don't need to worry. If you do go over, then unfortunately I can't be held responsible for any expenses you will have, but thankfully you won't accidentally have a bill to pay. Now I'll also be showing you how to pause certain resources, and when you pause it, then it should cost you either less money or no money. So what I'm going to do is click Start for free, and I'm going to log in. So I'm going to use a new account. So I'll click on Use another account in my case and create an account. So I'm going to put in an email address and a password and some more information about me, and then click Next. It's asking me to verify my account. I don't want tips, information and offers about Microsoft products and services. You might. And here I've got to type all of this. And then finally, once you've set up your account, you've verified it's you, so it's wanting a bit of information from me. So then there's the verification. So I'm just going to do that, and I'll unpause the video after that's done. So in my case, it's asking me to verify myself by card as well, but notice you won't be charged unless you upgrade. So that's an active thing. You won't accidentally get charged if you go past the credit limit that you've got. So I'm going to type in this information and then click Next. And then you've got the subscription agreement, offer details, and privacy statement. Useful to read. Would you like information, tips on Azure from Microsoft? Would you like Microsoft to share my details? No, not particularly. So I'm going to click Sign Up. And you can see it's taking a bit of a while. And this is one of the things with Azure. It's not the quickest, immediate thing that you might be used to. So if you're expecting things to take seconds in setting up things, well, it's more likely to take minutes, especially for some of the more complicated things. So finally I'm set up, so I will now go to the portal. So the portal address, portal.azure.com, and here we go. Now there are various start guides. So we've got setup guides here, and we've got various projects. I'm not going to do those in this particular course, though if you wish to do them, some of these are quite interesting. Instead, I'm going to click on the home at the top left, and this takes me to the home screen. And in a lot of these videos I will start right back at the home screen, so you know where I start from and how to get to anywhere. Now you won't actually need to use Microsoft Azure as part of this exam, the AZ900, but it is useful if you know what's going on. Now you can also expand this menu as well, and we can quickly get to things like SQL databases, Cosmos DB databases, and other things. Let's just take a quick look around Microsoft Azure. So here we have quick ways of getting to particular services, but what I'll usually be doing is typing the name of the service, say storage, here in the top bar, and that gives me a list, and I'll select what I'm going to get. Going further along, here we've got the command line interface code Cloud Shell. We'll be using that later, but only briefly. It's not used much in this exam, but you'll be required to know about it. Further along, we've got your directory and subscriptions, so just information on who you are, what you are. So here I'm on the free trial, for instance. Then we've got notifications. So this is telling me what Azure is doing. So if you're setting something up, you'll probably see that there's a number under it and a line going across. That's telling me that things are happening. We've got various settings, and out of these, I think the biggest could be what theme you want. Do you want a dark theme, or do you want a high contrast theme, for instance? But the main thing perhaps could be, what is your default view? What page do you want to go into when you go to portal.azure.com? Do you want to go to this, which is your home page, or do you want to go to a dashboard? A dashboard is your own customized screen which has got things from different services that you pin into it, so you curate it. I'm going to stick in this course to the home screen. Also, what is your default mode for the portal menu? Do you want it to be docked, or do you want it to fly out? So I'm just going to have it fly out because, as I say, I'll mostly be using the top in this course. The question mark, so this gives you various help and support, included guided tours. How we're doing, send us feedback. And then right at the end, we've got your sign out button. So this is a quick look around Azure. And in the next video, we're going to start using Azure and we're going to create a virtual machine. In this video, we're going to create our first Microsoft Azure service, and it's going to be a virtual machine. Now, I do have a shortcut to the virtual machine at the top, and you probably have that as well, but I don't know for certain. So what I'm going to do is, with these videos, start at home and type in the search bar the word virtual, so you can see what options I've got and what I'm clicking on. So I'm going to go to virtual machines. So I'm going to now add a new virtual machine. So you can see I haven't got any at the moment. Now there's a lot of options coming up, and I won't be explaining all of these options in this video. I'll be doing that in the next section, and I'll be creating another virtual machine but taking it a lot more slowly and looking at what subscriptions and resource groups and all the rest mean. So subscription, we just have one at the moment, free trial. I need a new resource group, so I'm going to call this virtual machine. And you can see I've already taken that, so I'll put the word 900 at the end. So for AZ900. So here's my virtual machine. Again, I'll just call it virtual machine 900. I don't have to call it the same as the resource group. It's going to be located in the East US. As I've said in a previous video, our services on Azure are hosted in data centers around the world. So East US, Great Britain, Japan, wherever you want. I'm going to change the image to be a Windows Server 2019 data center. Now you can see that the price has immediately changed. It was £52 per month. It's now changed to 100 and something pounds per month. The reason for this is I will be renting on a pay-as-you-go basis the Windows Server license. So I'll change the size as well. I will change it to a really small size, in fact probably the cheapest I could find, which is this one, B1 MS. This is just for testing purposes. I wouldn't actually have a server with so little data, so little memory, so little processor here in real life. So my administrator account, well, I will call this my username AZ900, and I've got a password here, minimum of 12 characters long, must include lowercase, uppercase, that sort of thing. And there's other things down here. Again, we'll be looking at that later. Now at the top of the screen we've got several tabs, and when I click next it takes us to the next tab. Now there's very little here that I actually need to have a look at for this demonstration, but I'm just going to click on each of them so you can have a rough idea of what's there in each tab. So we'll be going through the more important things for the exam AZ900 as part of this course. Now the review and create looks at what you've done and says, is it a valid virtual machine? How are you missing something? It gives you a price, so it's about 3 US cents per hour. As I say, you rent it for the duration that you have it. So once you're happy with everything and you can see all of the options that you have set, click Create. And then we wait. You can see we've got initializing deployment, then submitting deployment, and deployment in progress. It's not instantaneous, it will take a few minutes. So while this scroll bar is going across, you can see that it is continuing. So I'm going to pause the video until it's created. So you can see it is still creating, but it has now separated it into various bits. So we've got a virtual network, a VNet, an NSG, that's a network security group, and a public IP address. So it's going to go down this list and create all of these different components. Right, now it is created. So I can go to the resource. And it opens up the Virtual Machine 900 Blade. So what do I mean by Blade? Well, this is a window, but notice the bottom. We've actually got a window within a window. So we have got one window there, one window there. So the window that you can see is called a blade. And you can see we've got all sorts of things down the left hand side. And we've got some convenient things right at the top as well. And in the next video, what we're going to do is connect to our virtual machine, make sure it works, and then work out how we can stop the machine fully to stop it from costing us money. So now we've created a virtual machine, let's connect to it. So we can just click on Connect. And you can see we've got 3 different options, remote desktop protocol being one of them. So I'm going to use that, so I'll click on that. And you can see I can download an RDP file. So let's download it. There we go. So I'm going to open this up. So we've got a warning here, the publisher of this remote control can't be identified. Are you sure you want to trust it? Well, given I've just asked for it, yes. So we have got credentials. Enter your credentials. Well, I don't want to enter it as my Microsoft account. I want to enter it as the administrator of this virtual machine. So I'm going to click on More Choices and use a different account. So my username is AZ900 and my password is what I did in the previous video. I'm going to check Remember Me and click OK. So the identity of the remote computer cannot be verified. Yep, that's fine. And you can see it's now connecting, and here it is now connected. So it's just waiting for me to get into Windows. So because this is the first time that I'm logging into a computer, it has to set up everything, your personalized settings and so forth. And then eventually we will get the desktop, and we've got a start menu at the bottom. And from there we can go into various programs, we can install programs. This is your computer, it's your virtual machine. You can do with it as you will. Now, the only indication at the top that it isn't a real machine, a machine that's on your computer, it's a virtual machine, is the fact that we have connected using this port. So we can do what we like with it, just like any ordinary machine. So what I'm now going to do is turn it off. I'm going to go to the start menu, I'm going to go to the power, and I'm going to shut down. And because this is a server as opposed to a home computer, it's asking why am I doing this? Well, I'm just going to say other planned. Just going to put that in the log, and there we are. I'm now disconnected, and the computer, the virtual machine computer, is shutting down. It still says running. When I refresh, there we are, it has stopped. So I have connected to a computer, I've gone into it, I've done what I wanted to, and now I've shut it down. Is this costing me money? The answer is yes. Right now it is still costing me money, because I still have a virtual machine. The fact that it's not running is irrelevant. It's like if I've just bought a machine and I still have it under my desk. It's still mine. I can still connect to it. The fact that it's not running, completely irrelevant to whether it's actually costing me money. So what I'm going to do now is get rid of it. And it's only when you deallocate it, deprovision it, that it will actually stop costing me money. At the moment, of course, it's not costing me any money. We've got this trial subscription with a couple of $100 in free credit, but this is the principle. So anything you're not using, let's click delete, and this actually will permanently delete the virtual machine. Do you want to continue? And I can say yes. Now have a note of what else it says. Associated resources will not be deleted and can be removed manually. So we'll have a look in a few videos what that might actually mean. So let's click yes, and you can see now it's deleting the virtual machine. And I can move on from this. So now giving it the instruction, I don't actually have to be there in the same window waiting for it to finish. I can go on to something else. I can use storage, I can use a database, or I don't even have to use Azure. I can just go anywhere else. So in this video we've had a look at launching the virtual machine. We've had a look at the connect button at the top. We've launched it, we switched off the machine, found that was still going to be costing us money, and then we are in the process of deprovisioning it, which means that once it's deprovisioned, deallocated, it's no longer our machine and therefore will no longer be costing us money. So this is a quick tour about virtual machines. Hello and welcome to this section, which is all about core Azure architectural components. And we're going to be looking at these while creating another virtual machine. Now, you remember the last time we created a virtual machine, it started by asking us about subscriptions and resource groups, and we'll be looking at those in the next two videos. However, there is a level above subscriptions and resource groups, and these are management groups. So management groups are a collection of policies, compliance and access requirements where we can group. It says multiple subscriptions together, that's true, but it can also group management groups together. So we start off with a root management group. So you can see no management groups to display. Well, there is actually a management group. By default, there is a root group. Now within a management group, we can create management groups and we can create subscriptions. So a management group can contain a management group, which can contain a management group, which can contain a management group, all the way down to 6 levels. And then the end management group, whether that's right at the beginning with the root management group or the management group within a management group within a management group, can contain subscriptions. So if I click start using management groups, we can see we can create a new management group, and it's saying create it to be a child of root. So this management group, which I'm going to call management group level 1, this is therefore under root. So I'm going to call this MG level 1 and we're going to click save. So creating first management group can take up to 15 minutes. So what I can do after that is create another management group called level 2 within level 1. So it would go root level 1 level 2. Now I could call it level 2A and then have level 2B also within level 1, level 2C also within level 1, and so forth. Now the key thing about this is that each management group can only have one parent. So level 1 only has one parent, the core. Management group 2A only has one parent, which is level 2B, and so forth. So if I create another management group, add a new or existing management group to be a child of the root group. No, I want it to be a child of management group level 1. So I'll add a management group now. So this is level 2A. And then I can create another one within management group level 1 called 2B, and so forth. So what is the point of all of these management groups? Well, I can put some policy in there. Policy are rules saying you can do this, you can't do this. For example, suppose I had a policy called East US and I put it in a management group called East US. And that policy says I cannot create any virtual machines unless their location is East US. Well, I can put that in the management group. So now you can see I've got this MG level 2A created, and I'll just create level 2B. So I've got a management group with this policy. Any subscriptions within that management group also inherit that policy. Additionally, they will also inherit any access requirements and any compliance requirements as well. So why is this important? Well, let's say I have a management group and in there I have got 4 subscriptions. I want the policies, I want the access, I want the compliance of all 4 subscriptions to be the same. Well, I can go into each subscription individually and change the policy, change the access, change the compliance, or I can do it in the management group and then it gets inherited by the subscriptions. Now it might be you don't want them all identical, but you want certain things to be the same. For instance, Joe Blogs cannot do anything in any of these subscriptions, but Jane Doe can do it in one of the subscriptions. Well, I'd put the Joe Blogs can't do anything in a management group, and then I would alter the individual subscriptions individually. So management groups, they are a unit containing other management groups up to 6 levels and subscriptions. Each management group and subscription can only have one parent, so a subscription will have a management group as a parent and a management group will have another management group as a parent, all the way back to the core root, which is called the root management group, and all subscriptions in a management group will inherit the access, policy and compliance requirements of the management group. So now let's go back to our tenant root group, and you can see that it's got a management group and our subscription, which is our free trial. So if I click on the free trial, here we can see our subscription. So it says at the top management groups, but I can also get here by typing in the word subscriptions from the menu. So this top bit is not the only way of getting to something. It's called a breadcrumb. It shows, well, we went from home and then we went to management groups and now we're in subscriptions. So this subscription is a grouping of user accounts and resources. And now if I go back home and I start creating that virtual machine, so I'll just click add at the top. This subscription is a logical unit of Azure services that links to an account. So you can see I could have several subscriptions, and then within that I would have resource groups. Now I should point out that there are limits to what you can do in a subscription. However, these limits tend to be fairly generous. For example, if I go down to the container instances, then you can see that there is a limit per region per subscription. So I could have whatever these container groups are, and we'll look at that later on in this course, up to 100 standard SKU container groups in the East US in a particular subscription, and then another 100 in the West US, and so forth. Now these are fairly generous limits, but they do exist. Some of these are soft limits. For example, you might say, well, 100's fine, I might want to just get a bit more, and you can do that. You can request a limit increase for some of these limits. Some are hard limits where Azure will just say no, we can't do this. But just be aware that part of the reason for using subscriptions is that there are limits. So imagine you're in a really big company, Microsoft, or a car making company, something really big that's global. Well, you might get into these limits more often than you might think. So part of the reason for having subscriptions is to make the set of Azure services a logical unit. So a subscription is a logical unit of services that link to an account. Now you can also use subscriptions to manage costs and resources for a grouping of user accounts. For example, it could be for billing. Maybe you've got Department A, Department B, Department C, and they each want a different bill. Well, you create 3 different subscriptions. Maybe it's for access control. You want a certain set of people to be able to use a certain group or several groups of resources, but not others. Well, maybe you could have a subscription, and then you can put the access requirement, the policy requirements, and the compliance requirements in that subscription and have it be filtered down, inherited into the next level down, the resource group. Maybe you want to separate testing and development from production. So quite often you don't want anybody to actually have the chance of interfering with your production virtual machines or databases or anything like that. You want it to be completely separate. Well, subscriptions allow you to do that. Or maybe there's a compliance need. Maybe certain more sensitive data has to be handled by, for instance, the European Union's GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulations. Or maybe you've got something similar in your company. Or maybe you've got national requirements. Either way, you might have other reasons to separate out individual subscriptions. Now, unlike management groups, subscriptions can't be nested. So you can't have a subscription with a parent of a subscription with a parent of a subscription. No. You have a single subscription and its parent is a management group. And then within management groups, within subscriptions, you can then go to the next step down, which are resource groups. Now in this video we'll be talking about resource groups. So resource groups are a logical container for Azure services, and you can see on the screen that share the same lifestyle, permissions and policies. So what does this mean? Well, when I create a service, I'm not actually creating a single service, I'm creating a set of them. For example, if I create a Cosmos DB database, I'm, yes, creating a single service, but then I'm creating lots of other services. There might be networking, there might be virtual networks, there might be lots of other things. And so what it asks you to do is put them in a resource group. Now it can be a new resource group, or it can be an existing resource group. And sometimes resource groups are made automatically. You see, for instance, Network Watcher RG. I didn't create that resource group, it was created automatically. Now, if I go back home and then go into resource groups, you'll see that even though I have deleted the machine within the virtual machine 900 resource group, the resource group is still there. And if I click on it, the blade opens, and you can see that I've still got all of these other things. So I've got the disk, I've got the storage, I've got the network interface, I've got the virtual network, I've got the network security group, and I've got a public IP address. Now you'll notice that all of them are in the East US, as is this resource group. The resource group is located in East US as well. However, that needn't be the case. A resource group can have resources from other locations in it, and they can interact with resources from other resource groups. Part of the question of how easily they can do it is within things like, are they in the same virtual network? The resource group itself doesn't really stop other resources from communicating with this resource group. Now, a resource has to be in a resource group, and it has to be in a single resource group. It can't be multiples. Now, I can have access permissions on the resource group. we have something called role-based access control, RBAC. We'll be using that later on and mentioning it a few times in this course. You can set the access requirements on a resource group, which then filters down, which then gets inherited by the individual resources. Resource groups cannot be nested, so you can't have a resource group within a resource group. Instead, what you have is a resource group within a subscription, which is within a management group, which may be within other management groups. So resource groups, they are a logical way, a logical container for getting Azure services together. So I've deleted the virtual machine, but I've not actually deleted all of the other resources. So what I'm going to do now is, for this resource group, I'm going to delete the resource group, and you can see it wants me to put in the name of the resource group just to make sure that I'm 100% okay with that. So I'll just copy and paste it from here. So rather than just typing in a generic OK or delete or something like that, it's a bit more personal. You've got to actually type in the name. So I'll click in delete, and we'll see that it starts getting deleted. So resource groups, logical container for Azure services. You can delete the resource group and it will delete all of the resources within the resource group. Now, in the next few videos, we're going to be talking about things like where to put your virtual machine. But it's important to remember that while we talk about the cloud, it's not literally in the clouds, it's a physical building. So if you have a look at this, for example, we can see the sort of physical building that we're talking about. So if those are construction vehicles, then these are massive. So this is a data center, and it contains various networked computer servers. So here you can see an example of a server in the background. Now, a data center is, as you can see, a physical building. So why is that important? Well, physical buildings, like anywhere else, can be disrupted by earthquakes, bad weather, so hurricanes, or maybe civil action, such as riots. Now, obviously the effect of these could be to knock out the service. If there's no connectivity, then nothing can come in, and therefore you can't actually gain access. So with all of these network computer servers, in addition to this, each building has its own power. It has its own networking, and it has its own cooling. They are not shared by other data centers. So here we can see additional data centers, each of which have their own power, networking, and cooling. Now, in addition, this data center, this physical building, is in a physical location, and there are over 200 different data centers all across the world. So you can see here various data centers that there are across the world. Each of them have their own power, networking, and cooling. Now, obviously, 200 data centers, more than that, it's a bit difficult to organize if you have to think about the individual data centers. So that is why they are located into regions. So in the next video, we'll have a look at a flattened version of this, but you can see that we've got regions in the China and Far East, together with India. We've got some in South Africa, quite a few in Europe, and then some in North America, and a very few in South America. So these are where all your data centers are. Now, this is a simplified version, so this doesn't actually show all of the individual data centers. This just shows the regions, and within each region there are multiple data centers. So data centers, they are networked computer servers in a physical building with its own power, networking, and cooling, which are not shared by other data centers. They are all around the world. There are more than 200 data centers. They are arranged in regions, and data centers in a region are connected together using a dedicated fast network. So if you've got multiple data centers in a region, then they can communicate with each other really quickly. And for you as the end user, you don't have to worry about these individual data centers, where they are located. All you have to concern yourself are the regions. And we'll have a look at that in the next video. So let's continue creating this virtual machine. So we create a new resource group. So I'm going to call this virtual machine 900A. And I'll give it a virtual machine name. So again, I'll call this virtual machine 900A. It doesn't actually have to match the resource group. So the resource group is going to contain a series of resources. So just because I'm creating a virtual machine, that is not the only resource that is going to be used. As we've seen, we're going to have disk space. So that's an example of storage. We're going to have compute power. So we can see we're going to have one virtual CPU, for instance. We might have databases, Internet of Things, big data and analytics, artificial intelligence, serverless computing, DevOps solutions. We'll be covering all of those as part of this course. So the virtual machine name is just one of the things that is going to be created. Next, we'll have a look at region. So region is an area geographic in the world. So where can we have this? Well, if we click on this drop down, we can see that there are an awful lot of regions. Now, some are recommended. So these are the ones with the biggest set of Azure products. Some are less recommended, but needed if you want very specific reach of customers. For instance, we've got South India and West India in the other, but then further up we have got Central India. So it could be that these places in South and West India are getting a bit full or a bit congested, and therefore it's suggesting, well, have we considered Central India? So what places are there? Well, here is a map showing what places there are available at the time of recording. It keeps changing, it keeps expanding. But you can see on the map around 60 different regions. So these are physical geographic areas with at least one Azure data center. Those with a plus on will have at least 3 data centers. And we'll get onto what these pluses are in the next video. So you can see, for instance, in the UK, United Kingdom, Great Britain, we've got UK West and UK South. In France, we've got France Central, France South. Why have we got more than one in each particular area? Well, there's a number of reasons. First of all, certain countries will have certain requirements, legal requirements, policy requirements for holding data inside a geographic region. For example, Europe with the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, it's one big question of, should you store personal data outside of Europe? So if I was to store personal data in the East US, that might be a no-no for me in Great Britain, whereas if I was in America, storing personal data in Great Britain might be a no-no. But secondly, where are your customers? Maybe your customers are in the same place you are. So in which case, an area geographically near you sounds perfect. But maybe you have got customers all around the world. Maybe you're in the East US and you've got customers in Australia. Well, the customers in Australia can connect to your East US storage, but it would take a while. It's taken me a while just to move the mouse across. You can imagine it takes hundreds of milliseconds to get data. Hundreds of milliseconds might not sound a lot, but if you're doing things like gaming, for instance, it can be an eternity. It's called latency. And you want to have a little latency for certain things as possible. Now, it's not the case that you need zero latency or very minimal latency all the time. Some things you might be just happy having latency. They're not critical to have super fast reactions, but then again, it might be good if you were able to deliver the same experience to people who live in your geographic area as those who live elsewhere. So you can have certain services in more than one region. Now, it might not just be a case of being able to access both of these. Maybe you want to have something in the East US and something in the West US, perhaps, or Central US, just in case something goes wrong. Well, what could go wrong in the East US? Well, maybe a hurricane could knock out power. It could rip the roof off. It could flood the computer center. There may be some reasons that having all of your data just in one place might not be good. And so because of this, Microsoft has developed the concept of a paired region. So a paired region is a second region in the same geographic location, roughly. So for instance, the paired region for UK South is UK West, for France Central, France South. And presumably for these two Norway ones, Norway West will be Norway East. It's a very new region. Every single place has got a paired region, except one place has a paired region which is outside of its geographic boundaries, and that is Brazil South. Brazil South is paired with South Central US. So here you can see in this web page all of the particular pairings. You won't need to know any of the actual pairings except to know that there exists. So here we have the Norway pairing, we have United Kingdom pairing, we have the Germany pairing, we have China pairings, for instance. Now I'm expecting this Brazil pairing to change because there is now a new Brazil Southeast zone. So I'm expecting that to be paired with Brazil South. So every region has got a regional pair. But why does this matter? Well, it's for exactly the idea of a hurricane. Suppose a hurricane takes out East US and you've got everything backed up to Central US. Well, it could just fail over to Central US. In other words, East US has a problem. We fail over to Central US. People just access the information from the Central US. What if there was a problem with both the East US and Central US? Probably unlikely, but maybe the UK West and UK South, they're much closer. If there's a problem with both of them, then what could Microsoft do? Microsoft could work on getting both of those areas up at the same time, and probably to some extent do. But a better solution would be to, where resources are few, especially in a disaster area, is to concentrate resources on one of the pairs. So let's say concentrates the resources on UK South. Well, UK South then comes back up. Because it's a paired region, you've probably backed up to UK South. So UK South then comes online. At least everybody who uses the paired region would then be back online, even if not in their preferred region. Additionally, each region has software. It has these data centers, huge data centers. For security reasons, we're not exactly sure where each of these centers are, nor do you need to know, to be honest. So within each center, and there may be more than one center per region, separated by miles, there will be a series of computers. Within the series of computers, there will be software. The software continues to be updated because new services come online. So do you think it's a good idea to update all of the software in UK West and all of the software in UK South at the same time? And the answer is no, because what happens if there's a bug? Both of those regions go offline. Instead, if you've got a planned Azure update, it will be rolled out to one of these pairs. It will then be tested. It will make sure that everything's up to date, and only after that, if everything's working, will it go to its region pair. Now, I don't have access to every single region. For example, you might find it really odd if I have access to the US Department of Defense Central. I shouldn't have access to that. So I don't have access to all of these which start with the word US, as in US Gov or US DoD. Equally, I don't have access to the China ones either, so China East or China North. Now we'll be looking at the US Gov, US DoD, and the China regions later on in this course. So regions, they are geographic locations containing one or more data centers. The regions are spaced apart, generally at least 300 miles away. And where you put your services should depend on where you are, but maybe more importantly, where your customers are based. And you should also note that not all services are available in all regions, and we'll see that even more clearly when we have a look at our next video, which is all about availability zones. In this video, I'm going to come back to our regions map and talk about Azure sovereign regions. So we're going to start off in North America, and we can see that there are an awful lot of sovereign region data centers, such as the US Department of Defense East and Central. We've also got the US Gov, Iowa and Arizona. So these, plus 3 additional regions which are undisclosed, are separate instances of Azure with additional security and compliance requirements. They are for use for US government agencies, so we're talking at the federal level, so the US government, state level or local level, and also their partners. They are physically and logically network isolated instances of Azure in the US. They are operated by screened US personnel, and they provide level 5 Department of Defense approval. Now, in previous years, if I was talking about Azure sovereign regions, I would then be going to Germany. But the German sovereign region is due to close in October 29th, 2021, and we're placed with more standard data centers, so we don't actually need to mention them for the purposes of the AZ900 exam. What we do need to mention is China. We've got China East and China North, together with China East 2 and China North 2. Now, because of Chinese law, you need to have a partnership between a non-Chinese company and a Chinese company, where the Chinese company owns more than 50% of the partnership. So with this, Microsoft has partnered with 21 ViaNet. So Microsoft has less than 50% foreign investment and 21 ViaNet more. So Microsoft does not directly maintain these data centers. To use these centers, you have to be a legal entity located in China. The Chinese regions are disconnected with the other Azure global regions, and it doesn't have all of the features of Microsoft Azure in the rest of the world. So for me, in the United Kingdom, setting up in one of the China regions, just not able to do that. Similarly, I'm not able to set up in the US Department of Defense East. So these are the Azure sovereign regions. The US sovereign region is for government agencies, federal, state or local, and their partners in the US, and the China sovereign region is for legal entities located in China. Next in our virtual machine are the availability options, and we can see the default is no infrastructure redundancy required. But we have a couple of options: availability zones and availability sets. I'm going to talk about availability zones. Now, availability zones, what are they? Well, within each of these regions, the ones with a plus on them, so you can see, for instance, East US, Central US, they have multiple data centers, so the physical buildings. They don't just have one data center, they have at least 3. Now, they're in the same region, so the data centers for the East US would be roughly around here, but they won't be right on top of each other. They will be miles away, not hundreds of miles away. They're not in a separate region, but they will be several miles away. Now, each data center will have its own power, cooling and networking. So the advantage of this is that if, say, availability zone 1 goes down in the East US region, that shouldn't affect availability zones 2 and 3. So what I can do here is say this particular virtual machine is going to be in availability zone 1. Now I can then create a second virtual machine which is in availability zone 2. And if they are connected together through something called a load balancer, which isn't now part of the AZ900 course, but if you had a load balancer, an entryway into the virtual machines, and it says, okay, this virtual machine is available, you can have number 1. This one is available, you have number 2. Say the one in availability zone number 1 goes down, then my load balancer would say, okay, you can have the one in availability zone number 2. So it would keep my access to a virtual machine available. Now suppose I didn't do this. Suppose I said no infrastructure redundancy required, and I created 2 virtual machines. Well, they could both be in availability zone 1. They've got to be in a data center, so it's whichever one Azure chooses. And if they're in the same availability zone and something happens to that building, then both the machines will go down. Now these availability zones are connected together through some private high-speed networks, very low latency. So you won't have any big delays in accessing from one zone to another. Now, as we'll go through this course, we might find that you can do some redundancy. So for instance, in storage, I might be able to copy data from one storage in one zone to another zone. And that's called zonal redundant storage, or ZRS. And that might be included as part of the storage or the service, or it might be an additional cost. Now, as I've said, it's not available in every single region. So if I change this from East US to West Central US, then we can see that the availability zone is no longer available. Now, don't confuse availability zones with availability sets. Availability sets are available in each region, but all that's doing is saying, okay, I want my computer to be on a different piece of hardware. So availability sets, they have things called fault domains and update domains. We're not going to cover them in this particular video, but availability sets, they are in the same data center. Availability zones, they are different data centers in the same region, but just separated from each other by a few miles. And there will be at least 3 separate data centers where there's availability zone, and each data center will have its own power, cooling and networking. Now in this video we're going to turn away from availability zones and have a look at availability sets. So if I click on availability set, we can see that it's inviting me to select an availability set, and I'm going to create a new availability set. So what are availability sets? They are multiple virtual machines which are grouped together logically. So the reason for this grouping is to increase resiliency. So resiliency, if you remember, that's the ability to be able to spring back up when something goes wrong. Or in this case, not necessarily wrong. We're looking here at fault domains. So what is a fault domain? Virtual machines in the same default domain, as you can see on the screen, share a common power source and physical network switch. So if something goes wrong with the power, if something goes wrong with the network switch, all of the virtual machines that share those will probably go down, not accessible. However, if we've got multiple virtual machines, some of which are on fault domain number 1, some in fault domain number 2, some in fault domain number 3, they will all have separate power sources and physical network switches. So if something goes wrong with fault domain 1, well, never mind, because your virtual machines in fault domain 2 and 3 are unaffected. We've also got update domains. So let's say you've got Windows. Windows often